And we're live.
All right. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to our conversation with Maggie Dennis, Vice President of Community Resilience and Sustainability. I'm handing over to Jackie Connor, who's our facilitator of this call. Please go ahead, Jackie.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. So thank you for joining this call with Maggie. So we're going to have a wonderful conversation today. Just to start off, I want to say a few things. So first, for some of our people who are native English speakers or really proficient in English, let's slow down a little bit because everyone's comfort level with English is different. And we also have me to provide a few reminders. So please forgive me for interrupting you if you're speaking and I say, please slow down. I do not mean to be rude. I do not mean to put you off your thought, but we would like everyone to be able to participate in this call. And also, we do have friendly spaces covering this call. So please do be mindful of interactions that we're going to have with each other. And please do ask follow-up questions if you're needing a follow-up question. We're glad to hear those. And if we're unable to get to all the questions today, I believe, Maggie, are we committing to follow-ups? Yeah, we're committing to follow-ups. So if we're not unable to get to the conversation, questions in this conversation today, they will be answered in the near future. So we do have a lot of questions. So now I'll hand it over to Maggie.
Hey, everybody. For many of us, this is the first time in this office hour. We're doing it at a different time in order to try to support more people attending. And I just wanted to let you know that I do my best to answer all the questions that come to me honestly, to be accurate in my information. I get fast sometimes when I get excited or when I get nervous, and I'm happy to slow down if I'm going too fast. Jackie's good at reminding me, others are good at reminding me. So please feel free to point that out. I'm happy to see you all here. I understand there's a lot to say. I will try to be concise, but also do the best I can to give you the information that you've come wanting to hear. So Jackie, can we just dive right in?
Absolutely. Okay. So the first question that we have on the list, can WMF publish some evidence of violation for all globally locked users?
So the unhappy answer, because I'm sure many people are hoping that the answer would be yes, is no. We are limited in what we can say about globally banned users for legal reasons. The foundation has been advised by an external counsel that we need to be extremely strict in how much information we post publicly on that.
All right, thank you. So the next question that we have is with respect to the office action on Chinese Wikipedians, knowing there are limits to what you can share, can you explain what led to that decision? And they go on saying, including what the trigger point was, why it was done, whether earlier or later, and why the situation couldn't have been handled by the community. We're also interested in hearing about these same things with respect to the office action on Russian Wikimedian.
Okay, so if I captured all that correctly, what happened, why now, and there was one more subsection. What happened, why now, and why the community couldn't handle it. Thank you. Okay, so with respect to how we find ourselves here, as many of you may already be aware, Trust and Safety receives a good many concerns from users around the world about conflicts that they have within their own communities. It is the team's practice most of the time to send people back to community processes. When most cases come in, they are situations that communities are well equipped to handle. Sometimes cases rise to a level that the foundation feels a need to get involved, often because the issues are extreme enough on the terms of use side that we are required to take action. And sometimes because it is unsafe for community members to take action themselves, or because the situation has become complex enough that a community may not have the capacity to handle it. So when situations come in like that, the challenge is to review the concerns and to determine at what point it has reached a level that the foundation needs to get involved. With respect to the Chinese Wikipedia situation, we have, as some in the community have undoubtedly also, been hearing concerns for years about conflicts in that community. Conflicts are normal in our communities. Disputes about what is accurate information are always going to be hard. So it is not unusual for people to lose their temper with each other, for sometimes people to speak in ways that I myself wish they wouldn't. But when it crosses a line where physical safety may be in threat, or when core community policies may be overwhelmed, the foundation feels a need to step in. As to why now, not sooner or later, there are basically two factors. First, the in-depth investigation into these concerns lasted for about a year, and the case reached a point where evidence had been assembled sufficient enough for the team to put together a recommendation for the lawyers to review as to what seemed to be the correct course of action. It took a considerable amount of time to assemble this, to get content translated, to make sure that everything was understood to the best of our ability. At the time that the determination is made that for the sake of safety of others, action needs to happen, we have to act. For myself, I feel like every day we delay, once we know that people are in danger, is a day that we are at least morally responsible for people being in danger. So the instigation is, we know people were not safe. And once we knew that and we knew what we could do about it, it was time for us to act. So as to why the community cannot deal with it itself, there are some situations that community members can deal with, some that they hopefully will be able to deal with as we build better and safer systems, and some that are not safe for them to deal with in any shape or form. In terms of the Chinese community, the evidence that we looked at suggests that some of the people who have attempted to deal with this at the community level have faced retaliation and have been put in danger because of their efforts to get involved. And asking people to put their safety on the line to work out a community problem, I believe, is irresponsible for the foundation. I believe we have a responsibility to help in such cases, and so we stepped in. Pausing to revisit the questions to the best of my ability. So the question was also with regards to the Russian action. There have been two actions that impacted Russian users in the last month, but I assume we're talking about the most recent one with respect to Wikinews. I have to be more careful about that because, as I mentioned at the top of the call, for legal reasons, we don't talk about global bans. I was able to come out and say a whole lot more about the situation in China because it involved a lot of people. So I am not accusing a single individual of doing a single thing. We're talking about a pattern of behavior that involved different people in different ways. When it comes to the Russian Wikinews situation, that is not the case. But I will say, because the Trust and Safety Office team have already revealed as much, this investigation began in July. It was brought to us by 3 different people, including Russian community members, and the plural is wrong. And we evaluated to determine whether or not there was a threat to the safety of the users or the integrity of the software system. And the conclusion, the recommendation was that we could not allow a risk to continue. It was submitted to our lawyers to review, and our lawyers agreed, and thus we acted. And once again, we act when the investigation is complete in order to prevent any future risk of harm. I think I've answered that to the best of my ability.
Yeah, thank you, Maggie. Okay, our next question, and thanks for the suggestion to paste these into chat. So I will start doing that. After the office action of September 2021, so the most recent thread that you all are responding to, some users permanently left Wikimedia projects like Wikipedia. What does the Wikimedia Foundation think about this?
Well, two notes before I answer. First, I speak for myself as a person, but I speak for myself as a person who is also in an executive role at the foundation. So please know that I can't actually say what the foundation thinks because there are probably executives who don't fully agree with me. But at the same time, my answer does have weight. I think it's terrible when people leave the projects because of any reason other than that they've given everything they want to and can and are moving on to other things in their lives. And that includes when they feel driven away by other users or when they feel driven away because they don't trust the foundation. And I am enormously saddened that this action had collateral impact on people. I wish there were better ways to avoid that.
All right, thanks, Maggie, for that. Here's our next question here. I'm just copying it and pasting it. What are the short to medium term practical initiatives to minimize or avoid toxic communication and conflict? I'll have you answer that first part, and then there's a second part. What are the short to medium term practice initiatives to encourage the cordial exchange of ideas and create a healthy or cooperative community while keeping the communities independent?
Probably easier for me to answer them both at the same time because they're related. And I appreciate you pasting them there too, because while I'm answering, if I forget, I can look and see. So whoever made that suggestion, it was a good one. So in the most immediate, as many of you are aware, we are working on figuring out a universal code of conduct that can help guide people in how to behave, how to treat each other, and what they can expect in terms of how others treat them. We are also working towards how to enforce that in ways that hopefully include a ton of community initiative, a ton of ownership at the local level. I myself, I'm not guiding how the enforcement pathway is going for the UCoC, and I'm not personally involved in that workflow, although I'm keeping an eye on it at a high level. I think that for us to be fully successful in the long run, we have to have ways to help people as they work on the projects. I think that one of the big pain points I've seen as a Wikipedian myself, as I'm a volunteer as well as a staff member, although not very active these days, by which I mean I don't think I've edited in close to a year. Sorry. I think that we need to help people learn how to handle conflict before it gets too far, that we have lost good people who could have been able to work more collegially, civilly with other people if they had been given more support in handling problems before they became crises, and if there was better practices encouraging them to take the right tone. The problems, as I mentioned, in our communities can be very hard, and it is a lot to expect that everybody who comes to participate is going to know how to resolve hard problems without getting angry or saying things that they regret. And I hope that over the next couple of years, either through the enforcement or through follow-up to the enforcement pathway, mentorship and mediation becomes an increasing focus for the movement.
All right, thank you, Maggie. I have another really interesting question. So the purpose for the office to take series of actions is to avoid community capture. However, I have personal reasons to know that besides the Wikimedia China, there are other people who would like to control Chinese Wikipedia and use it to I'm sorry, I forgot that acronym wrong, and use it as a propaganda platform. For instance, the anti-Chinese government propaganda. With the removal of one group, what is the Wikimedia Foundation's plan to ensure that the other groups don't take advantage of the opportunity to bias content in another direction?
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that, well, it's not a surprise to me that the Chinese language projects have more people who are interested in content saying what's advantageous to them than the WMC. And again, I'm sorry that that makes it sound like I think everybody who has taken part in the WMC is problematic. I do not. I'm sure this is true. And I think in some ways, the fact that there are different opinions on Wikimedia projects is part of the design, and it's healthy that people come with different perspectives and work together to figure out what accurate information is. In terms of the potential for a power vacuum, that with the removal of one group, other groups may influence in another direction, I hope that members of the Chinese community who remain active in the project will feel safe helping us to see as problems evolve that need our support. My goal would be that we would be able to offer that support before we reach a point where that support comes in the form of banning people, and that instead we might be able to help come up with new processes, new approaches. I also really I know I'm pinning a lot of hope on the Universal Code of Conduct. I have always kind of dreamed that someday we would have a body of volunteers from across wikis who can help when crises and individual projects go beyond the ability of local communities to support. We've depended a lot on the stewards for that. And I've heard from some of the stewards that this is not a role they think they should serve. And I really hope that we will be able to work together to create a better system of supporting people across projects. In the meantime, I invite people to reach out to the Trust and Safety team. They, in addition to doing office actions, they have a disinformation team now who are supposed to work with community members to identify problems. And we are still figuring out how best to support you with that.
Thank you. I think let's just go to the question in chat because this might be a good segue and connection to the UCoC. How will the implementation of the UCoC in the Chinese Wikipedia and Croatian Wikipedia differ from most language versions of Wikipedia? Is that a question that you might be able to answer, Maggie?
Well, I will say the UCoC is meant to be universal. So customization of the UCoC at the local level is meant to be using it as a base. So it is very possible for a community to decide that their code of conduct has additional elements, further elements. In terms of the implementation, how it will differ, I don't know if it will. I think once we figure out what those enforcement pathways look like, then we'll have a better idea of whether it's customized in local communities, if communities that are having additional struggles need additional support. So I'm afraid I can't give a definitive answer to that right now, but to me, the code is universal. The implementation pathways need to make sense and they need to work.
Well, thank you for that. We actually have quite a few questions coming in. So I'm going to combine a few, so please forgive me, and I will type it into the chat in just a moment as these are coming in live. So there are some questions around why there's no appeal process if people are accused of an action or have a ban, and why does the Wikimedia Foundation not allow the person who is accused the opportunity to defend themselves?
Okay. As a procedural point, Jackie, I would appreciate it if we could focus on the questions that were submitted in advance. I appreciate that people have made an effort to come, and that means a lot. But the questions are submitted in advance because some people can't come. And some of the people who did ask for the Zoom link submitted questions as well. So I'm happy to answer that one. And I just want everybody to understand, I will answer your questions. If you came and I don't get to it during this call, I will answer them. But I don't want the people who took advantage of the submit your questions to be feeling underrepresented just because they could not make the time to join the call or this is not their language. So, okay. So the question is around appeal process. And can you articulate a little more? Because I just wanted to make that point.
Sure, sure.
What with regards to appeal?
Yeah, so I think people are concerned about their right to be heard because they're saying that that seems to be missing from the Universal Code of Conduct Enforcement Guidelines so far, is the right to defend themselves in a situation.
Okay. So with respect to the Universal Code of Conduct and the right to defend themselves, as I mentioned, I am not in charge of what the enforcement guidelines are going to look like. We have a drafting committee who are working on that with input of communities. There will be a ratification process. I don't know yet what that will be, but once the ratification process has been completed, then we will be trying it for a while. Whether there's a right to defense that's included or not, what that looks like, I don't know. Somebody's typed in terms of the right to be heard. I'm going to expand a little bit on this question to talk about how that works with trust and safety office actions, because I'm sure that is also a matter of concern. When trust and safety began its office actions, they were strictly limited to what I'm going to call bright line worst the worst cases. They were by and large people who violated our terms of use in such a way that our lawyers determined they could not, for reasons of liability, be permitted to continue on the projects. We do not ask to hear from such people. We do not communicate with them in the same way that we do with trusted community members. Over time, as with any process, things started to get a little less clear. People would reach out to us that were not what I call bright line cases. And that is what we created our own appeals committee for. And that is what we are still trying to make sure that we do the right balance of hearing from the people who are involved and responding to them. There are some limitations, and some of those limitations have to do with the limitations that trust and safety has. It has a limited toolkit. When trust and safety gets involved, there are only a few actions it can take because the community has so far stated a strong preference that we not step into some of the lesser sanctions. As a result of which, if trust and safety determines that action is necessary, they can warn a user, they can ban them from events, or they can ban them entirely. So we do not have currently a protocol that allows us to say, you're a great Wikimedian, but you won't stop harassing people. Therefore, we would appreciate it if you would not do activities on this project or wherever they're having problems. We don't have that ability. So within the tools we have, we try to work with people safely to understand their side, to understand the safety of others, and to consider what the best response is to ultimately keep our people and our platforms safe. It's a balance that we're still working to get right, particularly as we transition. And sometimes the line between borderline and bright line also gets a little soft, where something is almost over the borderline and then it gets tipped over by something worse. Anyway, I feel like I ran a little off there, but I'm sure there are more questions. And if there's not, I'm happy to do follow-up.
Yeah, there are more questions, and this one's a bit related, so it's a good one. I just pasted it in the chat.
Okay.
At present, the Case Review Committee cannot review some cases, which are those conducted because of statutory, regulatory, employment, or legal policies as defined by the Wikimedia Foundation attorneys. Does this put the Wikimedia Foundation in the power of being judge and jury? Is it possible to allow a community body like the Case Review Committee to review all cases?
Okay. Okay. So my answer there comes in several levels. I understand that to many members of our community, the Wikimedia Foundation looks like a single entity. I don't see it that way because I'm inside of it. So I see some of the distinctions. For example, I know that trust and safety actually doesn't have the power to impose sanctions. Trust and safety makes recommendations. They make these recommendations to lawyers who come in after the fact, read the cases, and make a determination. And then the lawyers who make this determination make the recommendation to the executive staff. In many cases, we've recently modified some of our policies so that the brightest of bright line cases, those cases that are clearly statutory, like death threats or child pornography, that doesn't have to go to executive review. There's no reason for that. We are particularly interested in making sure that we hold ourselves firmly to account on cases that do impact community members, particularly long-term, and who may otherwise be in good standing. Is the foundation and the power of being judge and jury despite that? Collectively, yes. In some cases, it is. The foundation has a legal responsibility to uphold its terms of use. And where statutory, regulatory, employment, or legal policies are involved, the foundation's attorneys have said that it is not possible to share all of these with the case review committee for legal and liability reasons. Again, we consulted with an external firm to help us determine how to talk about some of these cases in a way that protects movement resources. But I will say that we have to continue to figure out the best way to allow review. And it is very possible that we may, in the future, be able to create a system where there is a more routine review. We are also trying not to overwhelm community volunteers. When we created the case review committee, I was kind of scared to death that they were going to be reviewing cases every 10 minutes. And we were going to be taking these volunteers out of their regular workflows constantly. It hasn't turned out that way. So we see now that at the very least right now, they probably have a good bit more capacity than we thought they would. And it is possible that someday we may have a committee advisory group who routinely reviews at least everything that is not statutory, regulatory, employment, or legally mandatory.
All right, thank you, Maggie. This one's a bit more of a logistical question. I would like to know how you investigate cases in the Wikimedia community in non-English languages for which you have nobody on staff speaking that language.
Yeah, that's hard. It's getting easier because we have a whole lot more languages on staff. It may be that not all of you know that, and why would you? As Vice President of Community Resilience and Sustainability, I oversee trust and safety, I oversee movement strategy and governance, I oversee community development, and I oversee our human rights lead. We have the ability to work across these teams, and movement strategy and governance has currently built up a pretty robust language support group. Trust and safety also has a fairly robust language support group, but with over 300 languages in our system, we're nowhere near having all the languages. So it varies. It varies by the complexity of the case. There are times we use professional translation. There are times we use other staff from outside of the community resilience and sustainability team. We have a list of who speaks what language that people volunteer themselves for, and sometimes we can get support from them. And there have been times when we have used trusted community groups to support, particularly community groups that have non-disclosure agreements who can be relied upon to protect the privacy of all individuals involved.
All right, great. I'm going to pivot a moment to get to some of the UCoC and movement strategy questions so that we don't leave those out of the call. There are still maybe a handful of questions from the talk about the recent office action, but like Maggie said earlier, we can continue to go back to those or answer those after the call. So here's the first question, and let me paste this in the chat. The UCoC draft guidelines propose that the arbitration committees should be created in the movement. Does every project need an Arbcom?
Well, okay. My opinion, no, at least not immediately. The amount of bureaucracy any project supports should depend on the capacity of that project to support it and the necessity of it. Smaller projects may be able to handle these issues in a much more informal way, or we may have some sort of general international arbitration committee that can stand to support groups that don't have their own. So I don't believe that every project needs an Arbcom, but other people may feel differently. And I would perhaps say to them, maybe the question isn't do they need it, but the question is when do they need it and at what stage in their development.
Great, thank you for that. And then here's another one related about the UCoC. The draft guidelines for enforcement still have a lot of open questions. How can the communities see and discuss what the drafting committee is developing as they make their decisions, their revisions? Sorry.
Doing a scan of who's in the room in case there's anybody supporting that work. But there's a lot of people in the room and I can't see that there is. So here, I'll tell you what I know. So the modifications are ongoing, and there will be the drafting committee will be coming together to work on their revisions, I think within the next couple of days. And that work will be happening in public. There will be revisions happening as they go, as I understand it, and I would encourage people to keep an eye on it. Stay engaged.
Thank you. Okay, our next question. How will the implementation of the UCoC and the Chinese Wikipedia, and oh, sorry, that was a duplicate here. My apologies. How many people talking about the enforcement pathways for the UCoC believe that people have the right to be heard with a chance to understand accusations and defend themselves? This is a little bit related to the one earlier. So I can see that some people feel strongly about this.
Okay.
Here, so I'm not sure if you want to speak to that question again.
Is there anything in there that I didn't speak to earlier? Because I know there's a lot, so I want to make sure While you're looking, I'm going to answer a question that just popped up in the Zoom chat, even though I said I wouldn't do that. On the action and investigation taken against some Chinese Wikipedia users, has the WMF been able to rule out the possibility that any of the problematic WMC users were linked to the Chinese government? The answer to that is no. It wasn't a focus of our investigation to rule that out, though, but ruling out possibilities is really hard. So I don't know that we would have been able to do that even if we had tried. At the end of the day, what really matters is how they behave with other users and on our sites. Okay, thank you, Jackie. Is there anything in that question that's different?
No, not that I could really decide. So if I've made a mistake, please jump forward and let me know. But I can't see anything that hasn't already been addressed that you could bring out of that, because a lot of these questions are very similar in nature. So it's good that we're answering them because a lot of people have the same questions. We're going to pivot a bit to movement strategy because this is something happening right now. The movement charter candidates election has started, but with a lot of mistakes. 8 users had to revote, for example. It seems that a lot of time pressure may have been the cause. Is this true? Either way, how can we avoid this in the future?
So when I was scanning for UCoC people, I saw Kim in the room. Kim, do you want to speak to this?
Yes. Hello. My name is Kim, as Maggie just said. I'm responsible for the organization of the current election selection process of the Movement Charter Drafting Committee. So first, just for context, for those who don't know, the election of this drafting committee, which is happening as we speak. Please vote if you haven't and if you can. Was meant to start at the beginning of Monday, but we had some technical problems, and bottom line, we had to restart on the beginning of Tuesday. Before we were able to close the gate, there were 7 people actually who submitted 8 votes. And yeah, we had to scratch them because we were starting anew. What we have done is contact these 7 people, and actually I checked and 5 of them have already voted. So far the damage, let's say it's 2 votes, and there's still more than a week to vote. But the question was about whether this could have been prevented or something like that. Yeah, how can we avoid this in the future? Yes, I also was wondering myself, because my Monday was ruined. I mean, it was interesting, and it's always, you know, this kind of adrenaline thing is fun. But yes, I don't want us, none of us, to have more Mondays like this. So just explaining briefly, and there's a lot of technical details I can answer if anyone is really interested offline. But there's a combination of like project management type of things and then technical things. I'll just start mentioning the technical things very briefly. We are using SecurePol. SecurePol is a very fragile system. It's amazing the work we do with it, but there's only a few humans who got close to it, and all of them share one thing, is that the least they can touch it, the better. So when you do changes at the last minute, well, then some of the things might change and you don't even notice. And this is what happened in short last Sunday, Monday. How to avoid this? Well, first of all, and I think this was also already a lesson learned, but somehow we repeated it, don't start anything big on a Monday that needs to be prepared beforehand, because that means that someone has to work on a Sunday. And in many countries, that's not a good combination. So not starting on a Monday is a good idea. Avoiding a foundation holiday is also a very good idea. Monday was a holiday for US-based stuff, and some of them were related to this. And then we have time zones at play. And even if we had more redundancy than before, still we didn't have enough coverage of different time zones. And that was also something important in some hours when some parts of the world were sleeping. So this can be prevented easily, and we will just avoid repeating this situation. Then there's other parts related to project management that I think are related to the fact that we want to do our best, and do our best also means being flexible in situations, instead of just saying, well, no, sorry, you don't get rice because here it says fries, so you get fries and not rice, even if we have a pile of rice. So what I mean with this is that even if the process was clear since July, in the last days before the beginning of the vote, there were some observations. One was, hey, what if we start on the anywhere on Earth time zone instead of UTC? Sounded like a great idea. We said yes. Well, turns out that SecurePol suggests very bad anything that is not UTC. I'll save you the details. Another one was that, hey, it's very confusing that you have foundation staff participating in the vote. And actually, when that foundation staff are related to Latin America and with South Asia, that puts a special pressure on volunteers in those regions. This is something we didn't anticipate. There's good reasons why we thought that a common pool with everyone would be a good idea, but we said, no, that makes sense. So we will remove our 2 staff members from the election. And this was explained as well. And there was another very last minute change, which was swapping one of the candidates for reasons that also are explained in the talk page. So all these last minute changes had, combined with the fragility of SecurePol, caused a ticking bomb that we went to sleep. Well, some people went to sleep without knowing that that bomb would explode. And this is what happened on the next morning. We reacted relatively fast. 8 votes were in, but Well, apart from that and 24 hours of wait, that's it. I think by now everybody has moved on. But I found the question very interesting, and we have been thinking a lot about how to avoid this in the future. Yes, I agree.
Thanks, Kim. Also, thanks for helping to relieve some of my nervousness. Those of you who have been to these meetings before probably notice that I'm a little more somber than usual. I'm more nervous than usual. This one's early and there's a lot on the list. Okay, Jackie, hit me with what's next.
Sure. Okay, so our next one, we're going to go back to the discussion about the action on Chinese Wikipedia. The current Checkuser procedure on Chinese Wikipedia is complicated and not conducive to sock puppet investigation. Can Checkuser access be restored to those users from whom it was removed in April 2018?
So I talked to the trust and safety team about this, and my understanding is that with the recent policy change, Checkusers can once again become operational in Chinese Wikipedia as long as they are eligible to sign the NDA, which means basically there needs to be a reasonable expectation that they can't be easily identified and exploited. So I don't know all the Checkusers from whom the permission was removed in 2018, but what I do know is after 3 years, they would need to go through a community selection process again, just to ensure that the community continues to have trust in them. It's an important role. It's a role with access to a lot of data, and it would be important to understand if the community still thinks that they're good candidates for that role.
All right, great. So here's our next question. And I did edit this a little bit because to try and make it a little more concise. What does trust and safety feel is the right approach to take when they are reviewing a complaint where a person has violated the terms of use, but their actions were at least partly in response to situations beyond their control? And there's an example given. In one recent trust and safety case, it's well known that the individual caused repeated server issues trying to work outside the known technical limitations that were preventing important work from being done. They had requested a solution to the technical issue before, but the solution was not produced.
Okay, thank you for the example. And reviewing the question again, what does trust and safety feel is the right approach to take when people have violated terms of use, but their actions were at least partly in response to situations beyond their control? In the example, it sounds like legitimate frustration with a problem. And I would say trust and safety as part of their practice, tries to consider the context in which everything happens. As I mentioned earlier, the work we do here is hard, and hard work sometimes causes people to react badly in a given moment. I myself have certainly done things I'm not proud of when I'm frustrated or upset when things go wrong. So we try to ensure that the foundation respects that people are not always perfect and don't always make the best choices. If a person's response to frustration goes so far beyond the realm of what can be permitted on the site, we may still have to take action. So causing widespread technical issues, server issues, may be, depending on why and how it happened, enough of an issue that we are required to act. Threatening people, harming other people. There are basically, we can all react badly, but there's a question about how badly we react. Hopefully in the future, as I mentioned, I think eventually we need some systems whereby people learn better conflict resolution skills. And hopefully in the future, as we get there, we can help people learn how to deal with these frustrating situations in a way that is productive and doesn't get themselves or others into trouble.
All right, great. Here's the next question. Regarding the NDA policy change, is any plan or proposal of the long-term solution to mitigate the security threat?
For context, this has been referred to a couple of times, but for context, the NDA policy change, the non-disclosure agreement is what allows people access to personal identifiable information of individuals who use our sites. So for example, check users have to sign an NDA in order to see the IP addresses of users connected to their account. Recently, the change was to refuse to accept NDAs from individuals that we felt, based on evidence we had received, were at high risk of exploitation because they are easy to identify and there is risk to the users whose information they have access to and to them themselves that they may be forced to disclose information about others. So the real risk here, of course, is how we keep as open as we can as a movement in every way that we can, while recognizing that our work sometimes puts real people in real danger. There are people who are interested in stopping the spread of accurate information and who are interested in knowing who is trying to spread that information and stopping them. And we need to figure out a long-term solution collectively for how we can provide people trusted people access without putting them at risk or without putting others at risk. I think we don't have a long-term plan yet, but I think that we really need to focus on better digital security training for people. I have, in my years doing this work, seen some people who have fallen targets of bad actors out in their own contexts because they didn't fully understand how much about them was visible and discoverable and how vulnerable they were to attack. That's why we hired a human rights lead. Doing this work is dangerous in some places. And there's frankly no guarantee that where it is safe today, it will still be safe tomorrow. So we really do need to think as a movement about how to be safe in this world and how to keep each other safe, and especially how to protect the vulnerable people who trust us, elected staff, to not put them in danger.
Right, thank you. And this question's a bit of a long and complicated question, so stick with me for a moment. And I'm not sure if this is something, because I don't fully understand. So Maggie, I hope you understand it more deeply than I do. The Wikimedia Foundation failed to join the World Intellectual Property Organization as an observer, as China consecutively rejected for the application for the second time, citing the existence of the Wikipedia Taiwan chapter. Here are the questions. How does the Wikimedia Foundation strike an appropriate balance between the World Intellectual Property Organization admission and Wikimedia Taiwan in the face of continuous rejection from China? If possible, would the Wikimedia Foundation prompt the Chinese government to unblock the Wikimedia projects in mainland China?
So I think this is a funny story. I won't waste your time by overly detailing it, but since the China situation, where we decided to try to be more transparent than we have been in the past about these things, because the nature of the case allowed us to, I have, for the first time in my life, had to talk to press. And one of the journalists asked me, "Did you do this to retaliate against China for blocking your access?" Which made me laugh, because at the time we did this, I didn't even know that China had blocked our access, nor did I care. As I mentioned earlier, when people think about the Wikimedia Foundation as a monolith, they're kind of ignoring the fact that we're not. That isn't part of my work. So I'm telling you that because my answer to this might be different from the answer you get from the people who appealed for observer status. But at the end of the day, our mission is, the Wikimedia Foundation's mission is to support the community in creating online information resources and distributing it to the world. The first thing there to me is not first by accident. We're here to support the people. I believe that Wikipedia Taiwan takes precedence over observer status to the World Intellectual Property Organization. Do we care about that? We do, because our legal team is fighting very hard to make sure that the laws remain favorable to our work. So it's not that it isn't important. They really want to be sure that internationally laws are not changed that make our work impossible. But I'm here for the people. So I would not cut off any part of the movement to make happy another nation that wants to impose their political strife on our organization. And by our organization, I don't mean the foundation, I mean the movement. That said, if possible, would the foundation prompt the Chinese government to unblock the Wikimedia projects in mainland China? Well, I sure would. I don't believe that anybody should be denied access to information. We live in an era where so much garbage information is circulating online that I understand that there are some people who may be afraid that Wikimedia projects can be used as a source of disinformation itself, but most of those people don't understand how we work. They don't know how to check the sources, how to check the reliability of the sources, and they don't understand how to participate. But yes, if it were up to me, I would very much prompt the Chinese government to unblock the Wikimedia projects in mainland China.
All right, well, thank you for that question. Here's another similar question, but slightly different. Are there plans to reform trust and safety based on the feedback and opinions you receive from the community? It would be interesting to see it implemented.
Yes, we reform trust and safety constantly. We're constantly changing our policies and approaches based on feedback and opinions we receive from the community. I like to tell people based on what I see, because of course I mostly read the more complicated cases, as I mentioned. If they come to me, they're complicated. There is no normal trust and safety investigation. Everything is uniquely hard. And every time we get one of those cases, we have to stop and think, are we doing this right? Is this the best way to do things? What can we do with the tools we have, with the evolving landscape of our movement? So yes, we reform it constantly.
All right, great, thank you. I'm going to paste the next question into the chat. Do you think there will be any trust and safety implications of IP masking?
That question starts to get technical to a level that I myself am probably not the best person to address, but I can share with you what I understand, and I will have to ask somebody who understands IP masking and its implications better than I do to follow up. There are probably people attending this call who could answer this question better than I can. Yes, I think just like I was talking earlier about the trade-off in being open to allow anyone to help govern, anyone to add content with the need of understanding the risks. IP masking has pros and cons for our movement. It makes individuals safer. It makes it harder to identify vandals. It makes us more compliant with the evolving legal landscape in the world, but it makes it harder to identify vandals. And my understanding is that we are supposed to be working hard to create tools that make it as easy as possible for functionaries and administrators to continue to do the work even with IP masking. So there are trust and safety implications on both sides. Yes, individuals will be harder to dox. Those of you who are editing, it should be harder for people to say where specifically in the world you are and who specifically you are. This is good news. Bad news, it will be harder for us to control long-term and repeat vandals, and we need to figure out how to do that well.
All right, great. I'm going to reword this question to be a bit more clear. Is this action imposing US laws on the movement? For example, many people can't receive grants because the Wikimedia Foundation is constrained by American law.
Is what action? I don't understand the question.
As I guess this perspective. So I don't know if person who submitted this question, you might clarify a bit, and then we'll come back. And we have just about 6 minutes.
Oh gosh,
this
time flies.
Here. So I don't know, Maggie, if there's something that you want to jump in and say while we have 5 minutes left here.
Okay, well, without knowing exactly what action we're talking about, I'll try to get to the core of the question, which, as I heard it was, are we imposing US laws on the movement? The foundation is obligated to follow US laws. It's obligated to do so. So to a certain extent, imposing US laws on the movement is unavoidable. Wherever we are located, we will be imposing whatever laws exist in that jurisdiction on the movement. However, I don't know how else to answer that. I do think I have to understand what action we're talking about. I will say that it's not the intention of the foundation to impose US legal values on the movement. We have our own values, the movement does, that don't necessarily align with any one jurisdiction. And while we do have to follow laws in the US and in some cases, even in other areas, I think our goal is to meet our mission and our movement's values and do the best job we can to share information. I hope that helped.
All right, great. Thank you for doing your best with that question. Again, sorry if the person who submitted the question, sorry if I didn't get the essence correct there. So please clarify if you're still with us.
Yeah.
So are there any suggestions to the Chinese Wikipedia community to improve the vote of administrators and bureaucrats?
So my understanding is that the trust and safety team has been talking with the Chinese community directly. I don't know how much talk that has been, but one of the suggestions that I've heard is perhaps using secure poll. I was asked by a reporter recently because we removed the admin status of some of the administrators in circumstances where we had discovered influence in their elections and questionable use of their tools, whether it was undemocratic of us. And I want to say that a democratic election requires safety. It requires the ability for people to vote without fear of retaliation if somebody disagrees with the way you vote. This is another one of those areas where we're going to have to struggle as a movement to figure out how to be open and transparent, which are core to our values, but also protect people's safety. In the Chinese Wikipedia, we know that some of the actions that were taken by some of the people who've been banned include physical harm to voters who were not aligned. So we have to figure out as a group how it works, and whether that's the same everywhere, I don't know. But I do think that what must be present is the ability of people to vote freely without fear of harm.
All right, and thank you for answering that. And here's something related from earlier in the chat. I'm going to bring it back. So question from earlier, my general request is to show these fragile systems like secure poll more love to address its tech debt. Do you want to speak to that at all, Maggie?
The tech debt is outside of my area of influence. As I mentioned, the teams that I work with earlier, but I do know that our product team had quite a lot on their plate getting secure poll ready for the board elections. We had to defer some important work for them to do that. And tech debt is something that I hear people talk a lot about in terms of concerns on how we catch up. So I don't feel like I gave you a very satisfying answer other than to say, yes, that's a problem. And I can make sure that I carry that recommendation up and out, and I will, because I care about that too.
All right, thank you. And I do have a bit of clarification on the previous question. I think it might be about the fact that the foundation cannot pay grants in Russia.
Oh.
So I don't know if you want to take a brief 30 seconds. We're almost closed on time. So I don't know if you would take a brief moment to answer that.
Yeah, that is hard. I mean, it's just like when we try to hire people. We try to hire people internationally through our hiring partners, and it's hard if U.S. law doesn't allow us to send money to somebody, and in some cases even through a proxy. We haven't figured out how to solve that one yet. So that's a big problem that is still in the future for us to work out. Will the Global Council play a role? I don't know. I've heard ideas maybe, but I've also heard that, like I said, there are problems with giving money to a proxy organization to give money. So another big problem we have to figure out how to manage. And as somebody noted in the chat, by the way, I just want to reiterate what they said, that really it doesn't matter where we're based. Law, wherever we are, is going to apply to us, and we're going to have to work within the law. We may solve some problems if we were in a different locale, but then we'd have other problems. It's part of the reason why our part of the reason why our advocacy team is working so hard to make sure that the laws are favorable to our movement, is because laws are constantly shifting, and laws all over the world impact the way we can operate. Somebody else noted in the chat that the restriction is not always from the US. Sometimes it's on the receiving country. That's also true.
Yeah, thank you, Risker, for mentioning that. That's something always good. And thank you for your good contributions, Risker. You always bring our awareness to other things. So thank you. Well, this closes our time for this conversation hour. So thank you, everyone who submitted questions before. Thank you, everyone who made the time and space in your day to participate. And thanks to everyone who is going to watch this afterwards, because we appreciate your time and really appreciate your energy. And thank you, Maggie, for being patient and thorough with all of these questions through the hour, and hope that we can send you cookies, coffee, whatever to refuel your nerves for the day. And thank you, everyone. We hope to see you soon in the next one. So please consider your questions, and look forward